Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here with you. I traveled a long distance to have this privilege to be with you, and I really enjoyed. What I want to do today is to share a couple of, I guess the right word would be anxieties or preoccupations that I have concerning this idea of micro foundations for macroeconomics. I'm sure that all of you have heard of this really ambitious project from the side of many macroeconomists who want to find a stronger relation between macroeconomic theory and price theory and the rationality of individual agents, okay? And since I have done a lot of work on general equilibrium theory, I'm very surprised to hear that somebody would like to find more rigor and more solid foundations for macroeconomic theory, and to find those foundations in general equilibrium theory. So as you will see, I'm very critical of general equilibrium theory. I have done a lot of very detailed analysis of the entire model, how it is built, how it functions, and trying to answer the question, does it deliver on its promises? Okay, so this is what I have been doing in my course on comparative economic theory. A big chunk of that course is taking a very close look, very detailed look at Arrow de Breu and general equilibrium models, okay, from different authors, answering some of the, I think, the most fundamental questions. And these are some of the questions that I want to share with you that I think have important implications for this idea of micro foundations. So if you will excuse, this is why I put this title, as you say, provocative title of, the delusion of micro foundations, because essentially the question that I would like to discuss with you today is, can we find a strong answer to the question of micro foundations in general equilibrium theory? Okay, and maybe a different or related question is, are there other theories where we would find these micro foundations? And there's an even more important question, which is, do we need micro foundations to talk about macroeconomics? It's because that question responds to a particular project, which is a reductionist project, which says that what you need to do in order to understand how the whole of the economy works is, it is enough to understand how individual agents work or individual markets work. And that is, I think, totally misplaced, but it is an ongoing debate. So this is a contribution to that debate. Okay, so I start with a quote from an article in 2006 by Colegio and Cherry that says that macroeconomics is now firmly grounded in the principles of economic theory. When you read a statement like this, and look at the year 2006. It's, a year later, already in 2006, Robert Shiller was finding evidence of something happening in the housing market in the U.S., but this complacency is therefore surprising from that perspective. But look at this statement. When it says, it's firmly grounded in the principles of economic theory, you wonder which are those principles of economic theory that, give this foundation to macroeconomics. And, when you look at the micro, as I call it, the micro foundations project, you see that the objective is to derive macroeconomic properties from assumptions at the level of economic agents, of individual economic agents, and you're trying to see if you have macroeconomics regularities following from microeconomic assumptions. And this is the objective then is to link macroeconomics with a unified price theory. Okay, you think of price theory, immediately you think about general equilibrium theory. Okay, and I was reminded by this sentence from John Hicks' book Value and Capital, which is from the 1930s. That says that the transition from the individual firm to the economic system as a whole is made by using the principle of the same principle of behavior of a group of individuals or firms obeys the same laws as the behavior of a single unit. Okay, so what I'm trying to do in these slides is to send a message that the Micro Foundations project is essentially talking about finding in general equilibrium theory the basis for these micro foundations. Okay, so the theoretical reference of the Micro Foundations project is essentially general equilibrium theory. Okay, so I'm quoting here Robert Lucas and then Sargent and Lundquist. And look at this sentence from Sargent and Lundquist. They write a book and they claim it is on micro foundations. Okay, one of the reasons they claim is important is aesthetic, whatever that means. But it allows them, according to them, this allows them to increase the sources of empirical information, and then they conclude that this is the end of macroeconomics as you knew it in the old times, because from now on macroeconomics will be solidly founded or based on this idea of micro foundations. So this, I think, leads us, forces us to ask the question: what is the status of microeconomics? Because this is intimately related to the question of looking for micro foundations. So the question is, where are you guys going to find micro foundations that are theoretically solid and consistent? Okay. The next question is, can we find the micro foundations of macroeconomics in neoclassical microeconomics? In other words, in general equilibrium theory. If I look at an old paper by Coddington in 1976 on Keynesian economics, okay, I find a very interesting set of statements where he says that Keynes attacked the classical macroeconomic viewpoint and called into question its method of analysis, which consisted of analyzing markets on the basis of choices made by individual traders. Okay, and then he goes on, and we know the story after that this pre-Keynesian vision was reconstructed by neoclassical macroeconomics after Keynes, and their starting point was the Arrow-Debreu model, okay, which is the epitome of general equilibrium theory. Okay, and where you have all sorts of features. For example, one of them, which is that unemployment never appears and that economic policy never has universally good effects. Okay, so again, I'm trying to press the message that micro foundations is closely linked to general equilibrium theory. Okay, I'd be willing, we can have a debate on that, but I would take the position that if somebody tells me there are other theories, I would have to ask them which one. Theories of interdependent markets connected by systems of prices. The only other general equilibrium theory or model that we will find that responds to that feature would be probably Sraffa's production of commodities by means of commodities, for example, which is a general equilibrium model. Okay, but there are arguments. We can argue that this Sraffian model can be seen as a particular case of a general equilibrium model. Okay, so basically what I'm saying is the key reference then is general equilibrium, neoclassical general equilibrium model, okay? That's a theoretical reference, which is a world of market clearing processes, okay? Whether we have macroeconomic crisis or not, that's a different issue that I won't address that issue in this talk, okay? I just want to address the issue of how rigorous and how solid general equilibrium theory is for the purposes of the micro foundations project, okay? Because, okay, I'll repeat it, general equilibrium is really the most refined, the most developed, sophisticated, if you want to say that, theory of interdependent markets, okay? And and the critique to general equilibrium theory typically is based on the lack of realism. So what this means is that people see general equilibrium theory as a rigorous, solid, consistent theoretical model, okay, that has one big problem: lack of realism. Okay, and I always say that's first of all, that's an incomplete critique. Okay, it is a bit misplaced because every theoretical model will lack somehow. It will lack realism. Okay, you will have to sacrifice some kind of realism when you have a model. So you can defend general equilibrium model, and I can defend general equilibrium model, saying, "Hey, listen, this is yes, I know you complain because this is very abstract, highly abstract model, okay, and things like convexity or closedness of possibility sets. We're going to be talking about these things." Are unrealistic. Yes, but please be patient with me, because at the end, what I want to show you is how markets behave, and I want to show you that market forces lead markets to equilibrium allocations. So I'm building an abstract model that sacrifices realism for the sake of proving this to you, right? And so I would ask for your patience and say, please be patient. Afterwards, if I succeed, if I show you how markets are stable and lead to equilibrium, we can go back and try to relax some of the assumptions that are bothering us because of their lack of realism. Okay, that's a typical procedure. I could defend general equilibrium by saying, okay, yes, it's not realistic, yes, okay, but it is a consistent model. It's elegant. Well, its mathematics are superb, and I could use a lot of waving hands arguments to incite you to think that general equilibrium theory is the model, the fundamental reference for market theory today. Okay, and I suspect that because the critique has been based on the lack of realism, I think this is why today economists assume that somewhere there is a theory of market stability, and that theory comes from the general equilibrium theory. And that's totally wrong, because we know, if we know one thing about general equilibrium theory, is that it failed in its project to show that markets behave with stability, that markets are stable. It failed. The talk yesterday, was it yesterday? Yeah, the talk yesterday was on that point, it is well known for the people who study general equilibrium theory, but it is not taught in universities anymore. So students are tortured to death with, they have to learn how consumers and producers maximize, okay? But then somehow time is exhausted and there is no time to show what are the key aspects of the model. The model is not for the analysis of consumers and producers. And somehow this idea of microeconomics misleads people thinking that, we're studying microeconomics, therefore we study how consumers and producers maximize. No. What the model is all about is that once you have this theory of consumers and producers, then you see how they interact in the market, and then you have the theory of whether equilibrium exists, if it's the properties of this equilibrium are stability, uniqueness, optimality. But you have to look at the entire model, and somehow this is at least an experience in Latin American universities, the European universities that I'm familiar with, and in the US, this is not taught anymore. And the reason for that is very simple, and we can discuss a little bit of that, is that general equilibrium theory failed to show that markets are stable in the general case. Okay, and that's a negative result. That is not. You don't want to, show this negative result to the entire world all the time. Okay, so this critique then is incomplete, and it has a lot of implications. It accepts one of the problems is it accepts this starting point that totally misleading starting point that markets are stable unless you have something disturbing them, rigidities, distortions, external shocks, you name it. Okay, and then you need to study the sources of these rigidities and all that. I think that's terrible. As it has influenced the research strategy of new Keynesians, for example. They accept that, in the end, they accept this idea that, markets are stable, but there are rigidities. Oh, we need to study the sources of these rigidities. You have just made a big theoretical mistake, okay? We can talk about that later, okay? But, so my approach is not the problem of lack of realism. It is totally different. The starting point is that stability and existence proofs are flawed. We can talk about that. Existence proofs haven't been critiqued almost at all. Okay, in spite of the fact that there are many, many serious problems with the existence proof. Okay, stability. Everybody agrees that results are unsatisfactory. I would say they are a disaster. Okay. But the rhetoric in science is somehow, in many cases, tells you a lot of what's going on in scientific debates, right? My approach looks at the question, what about the micro foundations of microeconomics? In other words, I want to look at how individual agents, consumers and producers, are constructed in the general equilibrium model. So this is a funny thing that happens to me. Why do I come here? How did I get to this question? The individual agents. Well, I got to this question because I did a lot of work on general equilibrium theory. And when you go into the details, the entrails of the theory and how exactly the individual consumers and producers are conceived for that theory, in other words, how they are built, how these concepts are built for use in the general equilibrium model, you confront a key problem that I want to share with you today. And it took me years. I've been doing work on general equilibrium theory for a long time, okay? And this is a problem that doesn't appear in textbook economics, okay? You have to go into the literature really deep to establish contact with the problem that I want to talk to you about today. And so therefore I got to this strange question of saying, okay, you guys, you macroeconomists, normally neoclassical or new classical, the dynamic stochastic modelers, you are talking about micro foundations in macroeconomics. Well, guess what? Number one, you are probably thinking of general equilibrium theory as the most rigorous theoretical construct to provide those micro foundations. When I look at general equilibrium theory, I find all sorts of problems in the way the individual agents are conceived. And by the way, I'm not talking about, again, lack of realism, okay? I'm looking at the abstract model in and by itself. Okay, so as I say in the slide, let's take a closer look at this question of individual consumers and producers and see how it relates to the micro foundations discussion in macroeconomics. Okay, don't be put off by these expressions. This is in the general equilibrium model. Producers are specified in a particular way. Okay, how is that? Well, producer K is given or is defined as a firm. No, this is not a fellow. This is a firm that has a production possibility set, which is YK, which is a set which is convex and closed in n-dimensional space in the real numbers. Okay, you know what convexity and closedness mean. You also have a specification that says that your zero activity is possible for a producer. Okay, prices might be such that zero activity is a choice for them. So it means that zero is an element of that production possibility set. This property over here is very interesting. It says that YK can be a cone with vertex 0. This means that if Y is a activity vector that is available for producer K, okay, that's an element of that production possibility set for producer K, then alpha multiplied by that activity vector YK, alpha being any positive scalar, is also an element of the production possibility set. What this means is that if a producer has a production possibility, chooses a vector of activity that is possible to him given his technology, okay, then he can scale that activity vector in whichever manner he chooses with any positive scalar. Okay? And that new vector of activity, that new activity vector, will also be a member or an element of the original production possibility set. Okay? As it will turn out, this is going to be terrible for the theory. Okay? These properties are conserved in aggregation, which means that the aggregate set of the aggregate production possibility set, the entire economy, is also convex and closed. And in addition, you have this for various reasons. The intersection of the aggregate production possibility set with the non-negative orthant, that's omega, is the origin, okay, which means that free production is impossible in this economy. Okay, that's almost a convention. But the most important thing will be to remember this property over here, okay? So you have convexity, you have closedness, but you are lacking something because this is going to be terrible, okay? These are the structural components of producers, okay? Now let's look at how they behave. They are defined by some behavioral rules, okay? So producers choose production plans that maximize profits, okay, according to supply and profit functions, psi and pi, okay? Psi of p, psi k of p is a function that tells producers that given prices, they will select a activity vector that maximizes the interior product py for all activity vectors in the production possibility set. So this means that you're maximizing profits. Okay, this is what the profit function tells you. Okay, so this is the critical point here. Is this is a maximizing function for producers. Okay, remember that. We'll come back to that. Okay, there is a problem now that the literature normally, in general, 99% of the literature does not alert you to this problem. It may be that for a given price vector P, okay, just suppose that you give the auctioneer, this figure, announces prices, and producers look at those prices, and they find that there are no production vectors in their production possibility sets that maximize profits. Wow, this is terrible. What do you mean? You give me prices, I have accepted all the conditions. My production possibility set is convex, it's closed, and I'm price taking, I'm a price taker, and you give me a vector of prices, and I go and look in my technology, and guess what? I can't find an activity vector that gives me maximum profits. Well, what happened? Okay, this comes from the fact that the properties of the production possibility sets are not enough to guarantee that the image set of the profit function is not the empty set. In other words, you need to guarantee this, that the image set of your profit function is not the empty set. You absolutely need this thing. Otherwise, the market process cannot even start to function. Okay? If you tell producers, okay, you guys are maximizing profits, and then I give you a price vector, and then you look in your technology and say, wow, I can't find a single price vector that maximizes profit. What will you announce to the market? You will announce zero. You will remain silent. Okay? And the market forces will not even start to operate. Now this is absolutely crucial. You need to guarantee that the image set is not the empty set, okay, for the profit function. Okay. An author that explains why this is so is a very important author, Gerard Debreu, one of the co-founders of the Arrow-Debreu model, okay? In his Theory of Value, 1959, he has this amazing statement. No? Given a price vector P, it may be that there is no production vector that provides a maximum profit for a producer. Wow, this is, again, very, very serious. The reason for this, Debreu speaking, if for some activity vector yk in the original set, the possibility set, production possibility set yk, one has a positive profit, then that profit can be arbitrarily increased, which means that there is no maximum. All the time you find something, this looks great. Well, yeah, but there is one greater. Then that's, you can increase this arbitrarily there is no maximum. Okay, so that is Debreu. Another author that explains this problem in detail is Nikaido, Kukukane Nikaido, a Japanese author who has a book, let me put it right here, Convex Sets and Economic Theory, a great book, very, very thorough, very detailed, very rigorous, careful, okay? And what does he tell us? Well, he tells us that if the technology set is a convex cone, remember, a while ago, a couple of slides before, I said, remember this property if the production possibility set is a convex cone, okay? Which it is. Okay, there's nothing in the original structural assumptions of the model that preclude the possibility that production possibility sets are convex cones, okay? Then Nikaido tells us that we cannot guarantee that the image set is different from the empty set, because you can increase, again, arbitrarily, if you have, you can increase arbitrarily the profits, because if you have yk as a possible vector of activity for that producer k, okay, then theta yk, theta being any scalar, any positive scalar, is also an element of the production possibility set. And therefore, as theta increases to infinity, so is your profit going to go, sky high and beyond. Okay, so again, there is no production vector yielding the maximum profit. Why is that? Because your production possibility set can be a convex cone. Okay. We'll come back because I still haven't told you exactly the nature of the problem. I just told you that it can be a convex cone. Say, well, so what is this thing? We'll come back. We'll come back to that. Okay, let's look at consumers. We're going to find a similar problem with consumers. They are specified as preference fields. Xi is a convex closed set in n-dimensional space R in the real numbers. It has a lower bound C. The preference, the pre-order of preferences that has its imprint on the consumption possibility set is convex, closed, complete. It means that for any two bundles of commodities, the consumer can order them according to his preferences. Okay, there is a vector AI, which is the initial endowment for agent I, which is an element of Rn. And the constants alpha ik are the share of consumer I in profits of producer k. I'm sure you've seen these expressions before. Okay, and finally, when you add all of these alpha ik, these constants, you get 1, which means that all profits are distributed in this manner. Okay, well that's, let's say, the structural definition of a consumer. The demand function, how does the demand function look like? Well, it says that phi I, when you're giving the consumer prices P, phi I of P is a set of consumption menus or bundles of commodities such that they are an element of the initial consumption possibility set, okay, and that they are the most preferred, and I'm sorry for the notation here, there should be a little curve below that thing, but my computer doesn't have that symbol for some strange reason. So you are choosing the most preferred bundles of commodities within the initial consumption possibility set, such that the budget constraint is respected. Okay, so where PA is the value of your endowments, and here you have your income from the profits that are distributed from the K producers. Okay, so this is not any mysterious thing. It's just a definition of how the demand function looks like. Okay. Again, you have a problem. Again, a problem arises. It may be that for a given price vector P, there are no most preferred consumption menus for the individual pre-order of preferences that satisfy the budget constraint. So again, remember that the demand function is a function that maximizes satisfaction. It chooses the most preferred bundles of commodities within the subset of the initial consumption possibility set that respect the budget constraint. So it looks for a maximizer, okay? It has a different structure because of the pre-order of preferences from the profit function, but they are both maximizing functions, and they will be subject to the same problem that we're going to be identifying, okay? So the big problem is that there may be no most preferred consumption menus, and again, the properties of the preference field are not enough to guarantee that the image set of the demand function is not the empty set. You cannot guarantee this. Okay, you cannot guarantee this with the properties that we accepted in the beginning. Okay, remember those properties? Basically, convexity and closedness. Okay. Well, what happens now? If we wanted to be sure that the image sets of the consumption and the production functions, or the profit and production functions, were different from the empty set, we could use the extreme value theorem, the Weierstrass's theorem, which says that if f is a continuous function from S to R, and if S is a compact non-empty set, then f of S will have a maximum and a minimum, at least one. Okay. This is a very interesting theorem. It's a very powerful theorem. It doesn't say anything about the form of the functions. It just says that, if you have these properties, then continuity of the function and compactness for the domain of the function, then you have a non-emptiness also. Then you're guaranteed to have at least one maximum and one minimum. So this theorem is the typical theorem that you use in macroeconomic textbooks when you're told, as a student of economics, you're told that you have consumers and producers maximizing, and they will tell you to learn the conditions under which this theorem is valid. Okay? This is typical of microeconomics. But the question here, as you develop the theory and as you go into the theory, is that there is, in general, no reason for the individual production possibility sets to be bounded, okay? Which is a property that is required for compactness. So already you are starting to see here the problem with boundedness. The reason why you cannot guarantee that the image set of the production and profit functions is different from the empty set. The reason for that is that the production set is not bounded. We accepted convexity. We announced convexity at the beginning. We announced closedness. But we didn't say anything about boundedness, right? Okay. This is funny because normally the students confronted with a textbook in microeconomics will immediately, they will tell them, the production possibility set YK is convex, it's closed, and it's bounded. Next page, So therefore, the production function is well defined. I should say it's defined because, the image set is not empty. Well, normally, boundedness is introduced just like that. Okay? And that's not rigorous, and that is really bad microeconomics. But if you look at, I don't know which textbooks are used here in universities in South Africa, but if you look at the old textbooks, Varian, boundedness is introduced just like that, without any problem. Okay? And we will see that it cannot be introduced. So the problem here is that you're lacking an assumption, okay, that you couldn't introduce at the beginning, and we will see why it is that you didn't introduce that at the beginning. Okay, so much for Weierstrass. Okay, these authors, Arrow, De Bruin, Nikaido, but especially De Bruin, Nikaido, okay, tell us that, hey, because we don't have boundedness, we need to modify the original consumption and production possibility sets. Sorry, I like the word production, okay? Possibility sets of consumers and producers so that they have the adequate properties. We need to modify them. In fact, Nikaido uses a nice word. He says, we need to doctor the original sets. Doctor? What do you mean? So you're going to be manipulating, be operating the patients? You're going to doctor those possibility sets. Okay, we need to modify these sets because boundedness is a difficult property to introduce. It's not like convexity. It's not like closedness. It's totally different. It has tremendous implications for the results of the model, depending on how you introduce it. Okay. And let me go up immediately to tell you why. If you, like many textbooks, as I said, assume that the original production and consumption possibility sets are bounded, okay, without any reference as to how this property of boundedness is introduced, you may end up you may end up with an economy that is totally inconsistent. See, the property of boundedness is that a bounded set is a set that can be circumscribed by a hypersphere or a hypercube of non-arbitrary dimensions. So there is a limit, a physical limit to all the components in the vectors belonging to that possibility set. Okay. If I assume that boundedness is arbitrary, like convexity or like closedness, okay, it may be that the economy that results would like to produce so many tons of aluminum, but in that same economy, there's not enough bauxite to produce those activity vectors of that particular commodity. And the same, you could say the same for any commodity in that model. Okay, so the implications are tremendous. You may lose the possibility of proving the existence of even one equilibrium. Maybe your economy is totally unable, regardless of what happens with prices. Physically, technologically, it's impossible for that economy to produce the commodities that you are including in the model, in your label of commodities, the end commodities. Well, your technology might be totally inconsistent if you introduce boundedness in a haphazard manner, just like that. This is why textbook economics, don't go into the trouble of explaining how boundedness is introduced. Convexity is like I call this, for lack of a better word, and I hope maybe you can help me in the language here, convexity and closedness are topological properties of these sets. Boundedness, you can think of it as a topological property, but also it has physical magnitudes, implications behind the assumption of boundaries. You're thinking of limits, which is something that you don't have with convexity or closedness. So it's a strange assumption, but it's absolutely crucial because remember, you need compactness for this theorem to work. That tells you that the functions are defined. So you need boundedness. A compact set is a closed and bounded set. Okay, so this is why boundedness is part of compactness. You need boundedness for this theorem to work. Okay, so it's a difficult assumption to introduce. Okay, and let's take a look at how it's done in the proper way. Okay, because as I told you, the microeconomic textbooks that do this assume that boundedness is immediately one of the properties of these possibility sets. That's not the proper way to do it, because you may end up with an inconsistent economy. Okay? So you need to introduce it in a way that you ensure consistency, with especially with the existence of the general competitive equilibrium. Okay? So let's see how we introduce it. Well, we already saw that the production function, this psi k, is a correspondence that takes vectors of prices and transforms them into subsets of the consumption of the production possibility set. So 2 to the y is the set of subsets of y, okay? And you could say that since P, because P is a price simplex, is compact, then you could say that you already find the solution to using Weierstrass theorem. But that is not the case, because the problem is with the profit function, okay? The profit function is that once the market determines a price vector, the market being the Walrasian auctioneer announcing a price vector, okay? The problem for the producer is to go and look for activity vectors in this possibility set, okay? And then you have this interior product that will take you to the real numbers, okay? And the problem here is that this set, the Cartesian product of P and Y's, okay, is not compact because Y is not bounded, okay? So the problem, we need to have boundedness for the possibility, for the production possibility set, okay? To ensure that the image set is not the empty set, okay? Okay. Okay. Let me see. Am I pressing the right buttons here? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So to ensure that the supply and demand functions are defined, you need to modify the original sets, and this is what we are going to be aiming to have. We're going to replace the original production possibility sets yk for every k, and the original consumption possibility sets xi for all I. We're going to replace them with new sets that right now I haven't told you what they are, but we will go into that, which is an intersection with a new set which is E. Okay, we need to find out what E is. This set, yk intersects with E, has all the required properties that we need: convexity, closedness, and boundedness. Okay, and in addition, it respects the idea that you want to have a consistent economy, one that allows for equilibrium vectors in that economy. Okay? And the same goes for the consumers. Xi intersects with E, will also have all of these properties and will ensure consistency. Okay, how is boundedness introduced? This is the procedure, okay? Remember the definition. For an equilibrium to exist, you need to respect this condition. This means that the aggregate resources in the economy, this is the summation of all the individual endowments, okay, this vector A, plus the aggregate production possibility set of the entire economy minus the aggregate consumption, or actually aggregate demand. Sorry, I'm getting all mixed up now. This is the aggregate consumption possibility set for the entire economy. So what you have here in this parentheses is the excess demand, or excess supply, rather. Let's put it in terms of excess supply, which means that when the excess supply is intersected with the non-negative orthant, you have something different from the empty set. This means that you have non-negative excess supplies. This is the condition for equilibrium in the economy. Okay? If that is unclear, that's because my lack of a good explanatory abilities. Okay? But now we define a couple of new sets. Okay? First, for consumers, we take the initial consumption possibility sets. Okay? And from out of those sets, we have the following definition. These x hat I, okay, are modified consumption possibility sets for every consumer. Okay, so here what you're doing is you have the initial commodity menus or bundle of commodities in the original consumption possibility sets. Okay. Such that when you consider what's happening in the rest of the economy, okay, if you fix or if you consider the aggregate supply of the economy and the behavior and the possibilities of the other consumers, okay, then when you intersect that with your non-negative orthant, you have something that's different from the empty set. So what this means is that you're looking at the particular consumption menus or bundles of commodities for each consumer that do not entail a disequilibrium for the rest of the economy. Okay, I know it's a strange animal to try to define, but that is what this equation is saying. For each consumer, now you restrict the choices for each consumer, and you look at the choices that are compatible with equilibrium, considering what's happening in the rest of the economy, okay? Considering the aggregate production possibility set of the economy and the aggregate resources initially endowed, that this economy is initially endowed with. Okay? For producers, I'm going to be finishing fairly soon. For producers, you have more or less the same thing, except that you're looking now at the, let's say, the supply side of your model. Okay, so you have activity vectors, and that do not entail disequilibrium allocations once you consider what's happening in the rest of the economy. Okay, I'm going to move a little bit more rapidly. Okay, these new sets have certain properties, but we lost now something called closedness. Okay, I won't go into the technical details now of this, but we have to choose a new set. This is a mathematical exercise because you need to have access to some mathematical properties. This is what the modelers are doing. Okay, and what you do now is you define a new set, which is a hypercube E that has these properties. Okay, in particular, it has these sets that we defined before. They are within the interior of E, and therefore now you can have these new sets, these intersections that I was telling you about a while ago. Okay, and these sets have all the required properties that ensure that the image sets are different from the empty set. Okay, and now producers define the behavior of producers within these sets. Okay, forget about the original sets. These are the sets within which producers are acting. Now, this is part of the general equilibrium model. For consumers, you will have the same thing. You modify the original sets, and now the sets over which they are acting are these intersections with that hypercube E. Okay. And now the construction of individual agents is complete, but you have some new problems emerging, and I think they are important for the Micro Foundations project, as I said at the beginning. Okay, the individual or the original consumption and production sets need to be modified, but the problem is not only that they need to be modified, so let's modify them, and that's what we did. Okay, we accompanied these authors. But look, this is what I think. That the new sets require centralized information that no individual agent possesses in that model. Because if you remember how those X hat, Y hat models, what they contain information about the entire economy. But in the general equilibrium model, there is no agent that possesses information about what's happening in the entire economy, right? Not one individual agent. Not even the auctioneer, by the way, which is a different figure. But okay, so the conclusion is that building the individual agents in the general equilibrium model is inconsistent with the project of a theory of market processes in a private, decentralized economy. What are the implications for the Micro Foundation project? We need to discuss that. But I think they are pretty serious, and maybe they tell us that the auctioneer is, or something similar to the auctioneer, which is a centralizing entity in the model, may be required even before the market process has begun. To conclude, I think economic theory has profound difficulties thinking about privately decentralized economies. Okay, and for the Micro Foundations project, I think this is an additional obstacle that they need to consider. Okay, this is